I'm Nakmi, and a very warm welcome to this live Zoom podcast session. And we are thrilled to have you join with us today. As we have already communicated with you all, our discussion today will be primarily focused on the contemporary marketing challenges. I think it's a topic that is widely considered in today's fast paced business world. We hope this session will provide you with valuable ideas and insights that you can may take them in your respective professional endeavors. We would also love for you to be a part of this conversation. Therefore, please feel free to post any questions or thoughts if you have in the chat box so that we may suitably direct them to our respectful panel members within the discussion. All right, so I'm excited to introduce our resource panel now. First, we are very pleased to welcome Ms. Ramani Samarasundara, Chief Group Marketing Officer at CIC Holdings. Ms. Ramani has worked on some of the iconic and loved brand on Sri Lanka, spanning a marketing career of 30 years. A visible thread running through her career has been her commitment in investment in building knowledge and insights with regard to both consumers and people. This has enabled her to bring to life brands and campaigns that have made a significant impact on consumer behavior and loyalty. She has also built a nurtured marketing talent across this industry. So welcome, Ms. Ramani. And we also have Dr. Lasantha Mahindra, a seasoned banking professional with over 22 years of multidisciplinary experience. He currently serves as the Assistant General Manager, Retail and SME at Cargill's Bank PLC. Dr. Lasantha also holds a PhD in business and MBA in finance and currently reading for an LLB. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. So now let's get things started. So the first question we would like to direct this to Ms. Ramani. I think this question is with regard to the leadership of for marketing teams. In fact, providing leadership to marketing teams and organizations has become a real challenge. I think this is due to multiple reasons. So I would like to request you to share your point of view in this regard. What do you think the key focuses need to be sure having strong marketing teams in organizations, Miss?
Yeah. So I think we've all heard this statement saying that, people don't leave bad organizations, they leave bad bosses, right? And I think there's a lot of research to say that, close to 60% of people actually leave because they are, frustrated and demotivated by their leaders, right? And I think that's something for today's generation of leaders to really consider, because today there's a lot of a lack of trust sometimes. They ask people to do something, but you will also call to follow up and check. There's a lack of recognition. There's a lack of appreciation that is there in the team, right? And I think one of the biggest issues, maybe also the digital age has contributed to that, but we have to live with it, is that today communication is really bad, right? You don't really specify and tell your teams what you want. There is no compelling vision or journey that you say that where you want to go, right? And I think that's very important, right? I mean, as soon as you speak of a team, there is a group of people, but there is also a leader. And if the team doesn't really know where they're going, it becomes very frustrating. So you're unable to kind of build that. And, you might have different people who are part of your team, but by fact that they are enrolling in your team, they join for one common cause, right? And so then this, toxic cultures and mistrust and communication and all should not be there. So I think there's a lot of challenge for leaders to really ask themselves, are they nurturing their teams? Like a really nice analogy I like to look at is, from a parental lens, right? You wouldn't, say you don't have time for your children, right? You will make that time, or you will ensure that you're coaching and nurturing them and, taking them for this class and, improving that skill. But do we really do that with our marketing teams? Yeah. Because most often it is the brilliant, senior brand manager that becomes a marketing manager, right? But the brilliant senior brand manager knows to execute excellently. But there is a skill set he or she needs to learn in terms of how to lead through people. And so you cannot build successful marketing teams if you are not investing in building leadership of that team, right? So I think that's very important to really build that line manager competencies, right, in leadership. And so organizations, I think, really have to step back and see, are we developing our leaders so that they in turn can build great teams? Yeah.
All right. Also, Ms. Ramani, we all know that marketing contributes to the survival of organizations in any sort of competitive business environments. However, people might define the real success of marketing in different other ways. So, what do you think the real success in marketing in this new business era?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was a brand manager probably, 25 years ago, right? But I think for me, that final metrics of success is not about that great campaign you ran or the number of FEs you won or whatever that makes, that ticks the box of saying it is successful, right? At the end of the day, as a marketer, if you are not able to shift consumer behavior, if your ad or your proposition or your activations that you do does not result in the consumer taking his or her wallet, paying the cash, buying your brand, right, and using it, and then a week later, a month later, going back, right? So if you have not managed to change consumer behavior, right, then I would say marketing is not success. You haven't been successful, right? And from an organizational lens, yes, marketing is at the heart of the business, but I think you have to have a balance, right? I watched a video. It's an old video where this person talks about the whole balance of exploration and exploitation, right? So I think more and more our brands today are exploiting the same assets we have, the same product portfolio we have. So we are kind of stretching that, doing more, giving offers, buy this, you get that, bundle offers. And we're doing that to death, right? But we are not exploring, right? New vertical, new adjacencies, new product development, right? And so we are banking on the same portfolio that worked for us 5 years ago to also work for us 5 years later, right? Now, the consumer is shifting, right? And so if we are unable to understand and explore new news, explore new products, then, it is difficult for marketing to remain successful and relevant.
All right. And this next question would go to Dr. Lasantha. Dr. Lasantha, I would also like to know now, SMEs are considered as the backbone of the Sri Lankan economy. So, what are the factors influencing the development of SMEs in Sri Lanka, and how the business development strategies of a Sri Lankan bank should be aligned to achieve that goal?
Right. So why we consider SMEs as the backbone, basically, if you take the statistical data, SMEs contribute to about 52% of the GDP of the country. And on top of that, 42% of the whole employment of the country. But unfortunately, in startups, about a good large number, about 70% of these SMEs, so the startups, doesn't survive the first 5 years. So as bankers, most of the perception or the product development that we think about when it comes to supporting these SMEs, we think that, okay, financial requirement is the key element that makes these SMEs fail. In fact, it is not the case. So SME development has a paradigm. That paradigm have multiple elements. There are 6 key elements play a pivotal role when it comes to developing these SME, such as accessing markets. So what product, where to market, how to market. So this access, market access is one of the elements of the paradigm. Second is the infrastructure, whether that infrastructure is available for their products, and if not, how to do it. Third one is the legal and regulatory environment. Certain products need certain certification. These startups doesn't know how to get it, where to get it. So all this the support. One of the key element is the human capital development. For example, I'll tell you the workforce readiness. Because this SME starts with very few people, mostly family oriented. Then it's micro SMEs develop into SMEs. Those SMEs develop into large corporates. Those large corporates develop into conglomerates. So most of the conglomerates that we have today in Sri Lanka, long time back, started as an SME. Even BMW started as a family-owned company. So we all know. So when this workforce readiness is not there, for example, if one of the employees who basically specialized in certain area, if he falls sick or if he leaves, the readiness to take over that requirement from the other employees is not there. So human capital development is another key element. Then the innovation technology in this ever-changing world, those innovation and technology R&Ds are, as Ramani also said, this R&D plays a pivotal role. Final element is only the finance requirement. Imagine you go and provide a financial solution by ignoring all the other elements in the paradigm. And one of those elements fail, the entire process shuts down. So then they won't be able to repay the loan or whatever the loan that financial support given by the bank. Ultimately, banks also start pressurizing them to recover the money, and the process collects. So when banks develop products and services, they should embed this incubation culture, because we need to incubate them for them to then perform. So this culture has to come in when banks develop their strategies, products, and even the marketing strategies for us to develop SMEs in this country.
All right. And Dr. Lasantha, I think as we all know, banks are becoming very competitive. I mean, by introducing or shaping or reshaping their banking portfolio. However, there are many challenges to be faced up, selling them to banking customers, establishing trust and transparency. How do you find this situation as a bank, Dr. Lasantha?
Very valid question. So basically, banks deal with public money. So whenever there is money involved, the transparency and the trust has to be built. So all communications from the bank side has to be very transparent, and it should win the trust of the consumer. It is very crucial. So basically, because the cross-selling and upselling has to happen to create stickiness of the customer. If you are a customer with one product in a bank, it's very easy for him to shift out. So basically, you have to have multiple products to create that stickiness. But when you try to cross-sell, even for the sales team, you need to give bare minimum data, right? I'll give you a real life example. So if you have an FD with a bank, if someone calls you and say, I'm so and so from the bank, so you have this much of FD with this branch, and from this period, I would like to canvas offer a credit card with you. It's totally fine. You have to cross sell. But the first perception that I get is, okay, whether my data is compromised, whether my information is being shared among all the staff in the bank. So you have to give the bare minimum information. If he is an account holder, you can introduce yourself, and that trust has to be built. And on top of that, when you cross-sell or sell a product, the transparency has to be there. So products will have pros and cons. So you have to give them, this is the feature, this is the benefits you will get. But having said that, these are the cost elements that involved in enjoying that product. If you only sell the benefit side of it, when the customer enjoy that benefit, and ultimately if he sees the cost element is triggering up by doing that without his knowledge, then the customer frustrations kicks in. So since banking services are involved with money, transparency and trust is dire.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much, Dr. Lasanta. And the next question, I would like to direct this to Ms. Ramani. Uh, Ms. Ramani, now consumers are changing with their expectations, aspirations, buying patterns, likes, dislikes, etc. In this volatile market conditions, how should brand custodians plan out their respective brand activations?
Yeah. So, I mean, in my book, I mean, the primary role of a brand custodian is to really know your consumer, right? Yes. And I empathize with, I mean, I think whether it's an MNC or a local company or a family owned business, always the marketer will, raise their hand and say, look, I'm like a coordinator. I have to, check with this one and that one and follow up with this thing. Everybody's are not doing their work, right? That may be true, right? You may have to do that because you are the custodian of the brand. You hold things together. But we must never forget that our primary role is to really know the consumer and to bring that consumer insight and knowledge into the business. Because if we don't do that, nobody else is going to do that. You might be following up with R&D and supply chain, but R&D and supply chain are not going to bring your consumer insights to the business, right? So if you are not continually bringing that to the business, then we will be, innovating and designing and developing things which are not anywhere any longer relevant, right? So I want to kind of bring, just tell two stories, right? And if any of the guys like to kind of, respond on the chat, right? How much do you spend on a haircut, right? Guys in the group, if you like to say how much do you spend on a haircut, right? So today, yes, you can go, you have fairly mid-level reasonable salons. I think my husband goes to one of them. Maybe he gets a massage and a haircut or whatever for 1,500, $2,000, right? But I know young people today, right, who are probably kind of earning less than 100,000 bucks, who will spend as much as 6,000 bucks, right, or more on a haircut. They don't have much hair, right? But they will go and spend that amount of money right now. Then, so we must understand why are people then spending money like that, young girls today, they will spend, sometimes 10, 15,000 bucks to do their nails or to color their hair, some, exorbitant, 20, 30,000 bucks, earning only some 70, 80,000 rupees, right? But this is the consumer we are dealing with, right? But we all come to that default of saying, oh, pricing is difficult, we have to be VFM. But we must understand what are people looking for. And, I don't, however much you have built brands and you are a marketer, I don't know whether we can really put your hand on your heart and say, I know my consumer, right? Because the consumer is always changing, right? And if we don't keep a pulse with that, right, then we will be designing and developing things that are not relevant for him or her. So, what features are they looking for? What value propositions will work for them, right? That's really important to understand, right? Um, and I mean, the other part is the fact of knowing your consumer. I recently did some training sessions for fairly big local conglomerate, right? And I was sharing with them some information of showing, these are your provinces and this is the um, different sectors of, agri, service, whatever, and the income that comes, right? And you could see very clearly that Northwestern and some areas were very strong agri markets, right? Agriculture, rich agriculture driven economies. And I asked, this was a group of 30, 40 people, do you know when Yala is? Do you know when Maha is? Right? Because it is in those seasons that those areas get the money, right? Whether it's the banking sector, whether it's the FMCG sector, whatever is the white goods company. Now, if you don't know that, how will you talk to them? How will you market to them? How will you develop relevant programs to create that aspiration for your brands and for them to spend that money they earn, right? So we really need to understand consumer journey, their life, their lifestyle, what they are looking for, right? And it is really um, extremely important for us to keep changing with that changing consumer, right? So I always tell people I work with, you know, you have those five senses, right? You could go tomorrow to your mother-in-law's house or to a friend's place. Do you remember, the soap that was in that toilet? What did they use? It is those little things that you pick up, right? That you sense, that you see, that helps you to kind of decode and understand, saying, oh, looks like these people, the consumers are more, gravitating towards this, right? People are eating more healthy, or people kind of, are now going off bread. I don't know, I'm just making these things up, but you absorb everything that you see, and that really helps you to understand that changing consumer.
Okay, all right. Dr. Lasanta, the next question is you. So, it is needed, indeed, the general understanding that the financial sector is quite often influenced by various socio-economic factors, right? So, how do you find this situation as an experienced senior marketing professional in the local banking sector?
Good. So basically, theoretically, how banks works, we go on a theory called financial intermediation theory. So banks are basically an intermediator who takes money from the excess liquid, and we lend that money to people who needs liquidity. So we keep a margin on that. We call it NIM, or net interest margin. Or that's the spread that the banks that's how banks make money. So pricing of our products, however, has a huge influence, or basically a correlation with the macroeconomic factors of the country. For example, the real interest rates, inflation, and GDP. Um, on top of that, with the implementation of IFRS 9, the provisioning model from incurred loss model to a expected loss model, we call it the forward-looking approach. So the key variable on calculating the provision on an expected loss model also include these macroeconomic factors. So when we develop products and services, if we don't take into consideration of the past trend and the future aspirations of how this macroeconomic factor behaves, the product will be not aligned with the market conditions. So ultimately, what the products will do is product will fail, because then the bank will also not make profits out of selling those products, and also the consumer who consume it, or use those products, will also have a negative impact when the economical factors change. So to answer that question, basically it is the responsibility of the bank, when we develop products and services and we sell, we need to bring that culture of considering the macroeconomic factors into the design of those products to make it more profitable for both, beneficial rather, for both bank and the consumer.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lasanta. Ms. Ramani, I think now AI has already become a buzzword, especially in this generation. So, how do you perceive the role of branding in a world full of AI tools now?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot of good that brand managers need to kind of equip themselves and understand the different tools that are there in AI. And at every stage, whether it's in consumer insighting, whether it's in designing, right? Whether it's in, tracking trends, whether it's in the whole data space, right? AI can kind of pull together many insights, many um, perspectives, right, of published data. They can kind of pull from different places and give you kind of comparatives, give you best case scenarios, right? And that's good, because it kind of helps you to stretch your mind. It can kind of cut down some of the analysis that you maybe take, a couple of days to do, you can do it in a couple of hours, right? So it frees your time, right? And whilst on one hand, life is about really understanding how to give that right prompt and how you, help AI to kind of learn more about the way you want to kind of get something done. And it'll always be an evolving learning situation, right? But I just feel that there are two aspects, right? That I feel, this is personally, I mean, I might be proved wrong, that there is room for brand managers and brand management to kind of still, uh, develop that muscle or that skill set. One is the whole space of empathy, right? One is the whole space of empathy. And again, going back to that story about the consumer, right? Um, yes, all your kind of chat GPTs and your co-pilots and all of those can be kind of trained to think empathetically. But I think that's a lot of intuition that you bring, right? That's a lot of insight mining that you bring, because you use your senses, because you see people, you decipher, you are able to kind of connect the dots and you decipher and see emotions, right? And you are able to kind of understand some of the kind of pain and the needs that are there, and therefore you are able to design. The second aspect is the aspect of creativity, right? Now, I mean, there are, films, communication that is now totally developed on AI as well. And, maybe a little rough on the edges now, right? But I'm sure in the months to come, years to come, those roughness and that kind of artificial kind of look and feel will go, right? But I feel, again, understanding the consumer, being able to design in a way that is creatively superior, right, are things I think that, we have to continue to develop, continue to harness and develop, um, and not thinking that, we can just sit back and let AI do everything for us. And there are lots of stories of, how just observing things. I can't kind of remember the brand now, but there was this whole range of kitchen kitchen kind of cutlery, right? So the potato peelers and the knives and stuff like that. One whole range that was born because this gentleman watched his wife who struggled with arthritis, right? Who was not able to kind of use this knife. It kept slipping, and so this range of products was developed with a non-slip kind of grip, the roundness of those edges, right? And it all came from him being able to empathize and understand, right, the situation that his wife was, and in creating something that was really, meaningful, relevant, and delighted her, and then many more people like her, and even normal people like us, right? So I think there's a big job for us to kind of develop in a culture and world. I know Gen Zs get a lot of this tag of saying, they're very individualistic, right? But I think there is a need, for those, particularly in marketing, to really develop that muscle of empathy, right? Because that's so important, since you are in the business of designing solutions for people, right? Then we have to be able to, you know, flex that muscle of empathy, in being able to kind of bring that back to the business. Yeah.
Okay, very interesting. And Dr. Lasanta, next question goes to you. All right.
Yes.
So, Dr. Lasanta, let me direct a quite straightforward question to you. Is it healthy to have a high competition among financial institutes?
Okay, it's the answer will be yes and no, both. For example, I start with a small example. We all know that Encyclopedia of Britannica. that it was a privilege to have that entire set of Britannica at your library. So when I was young, very young, I remember my dad used to buy one book at a time because he cannot afford to buy the entire thing, and he filled the library with that with pride. Having said that, with the competition, what happened? Basically, when Encarta came into play, Britannica thought, okay, Encarta will never disrupt the market. So when Encarta came with a CD, just a CD where you can search everything without going through the pages, what Britannica did was, okay, their sales came down, and the Encarta ultimately made Britannica no longer a brand. So in about good 25 years back, a bank manager had a secretary, right? The shift in the industry, what I'm explaining. And if a customer wants to meet that bank manager, he needs to make an appointment with that secretary for the customer to go and meet him or her rather. But now with the competition, where the consumer are considered or the customers are considered more valuable in the industry, where the bank managers now fix appointments with the clients to go and meet them. That is because of the competition. Imagine where a competition is not there in that industry, the dictatorship happens, to be honest. So in a way, yes, why I say its competition is good, then more innovation comes into play, and also more customer service oriented culture creates, so that the consumers are served better. Having said that, too much competition can create instability in the industry. So because the market is small, if everyone is trying to get into that same pie and eat it, so that creates instability in the market. So since this is a financial industry where we deal with money, so it has to strike a balance. So recently also now central bank also started the process of evaluating the process of consolidating banks to create this stability and to reduce this competition. So as I said briefly, yes, you should have that competition, but too much competition is not healthy.
Okay, doctor. And I think people have different choices and consideration when selecting a bank for their banking needs. So, what have you observed as typical factors considered by the local banking customers? And are there any ideal set of factors to be considered, doctor?
Basically, key three elements has to be fulfilled. First, ease of doing transaction. If a banking transaction is a pain point, so the customer will definitely thinking of shifting that bank. Second is the trust, because as I said earlier, we deal with money. Money needs a lot of trust. The third thing is the transparency, because since all this data that we share with them has to be accurate, 100% accurate, because no errors, room for errors on communication that the bank can have. Accurate, and the transparency is there. If those all three elements are fulfilled, people compromise a certain amount of income. For example, certain banks, they don't depend on the interest rates. So they depend on the ease of doing transactions, trust, and the transparency. So people are willing, because it has a price. All these good qualities of an institution has a price. So people willing to compromise a little bit of interest rates here and there to get that uh, elements done. So banking is all about that.
Okay, very interesting. Thank you, Dr. Lasanta. And I think final question goes to Ms. Ramani. Ms. Ramani, data-driven decision making has proven to be the most relevant in today's context. What is your advice to modern marketeers in making their marketing decision?
Yeah. Okay, so just before that, too, if anybody is interested, that the brand name is Oxo Good, Oxo Good Grips. It was developed in 1989, I think, by a gentleman called Sam Faber. So you can go and read that case study. It's interesting. Yeah, so I think, what data has given us, it helps us to kind of zero in on the problem. It helps us to kind of understand what is the best fit, best return on investment that you can get, right? We all have issues of marketing budgets, right? Even if you have a decent marketing budget at the beginning of the year, it's probably one of the first places that management will look to kind of, cut as the profit pressure kind of builds up through the year, right? So you really need to, and today you guys are kind of living in a world that has multiple media vehicle options, right? Unlike 20, 30 years ago, where it was very kind of, it was just, TV, print, radio, and, maybe films and stuff like that. Yeah. Today, you have very specific channels both on kind of digital mediums and also in terms of route to market to reach your consumer, right? So to understand which is going to give me my better return, right? Today, data is very important to do, right? And so whilst you might have very formal data sources that you will kind of get from research agencies and stuff like that, right? Which sometimes we will have monthly panels or, quarterly dipsticks that you will do, right? Like I said, intuitively to also kind of know and understand, sometimes just watch to see what are kind of in an hour at a supermarket, what is the kind of basket look like, what does the basket value look like, right? To be able to correlate and say, oh, why is my modern trade in Ampare growing, whereas my general trade in Ampare is not growing. So it's the same group of people who are there. What's the difference? Is there really an issue in distribution, right? Or is there an issue in terms of the relationship there? Now, all of that, most of your companies would have, right? But the question is, how much are we using, right? Or are we just, just running to execute, right? So I think today, formal and informal, there are a lot of data sources, right? You have lots of published data in terms of from central bank, from census and statistics, right? You have lots of research papers that people have done. So it's a matter of you can kind of mirror certain markets. I remember somebody, I think from John Keels, talked to us about when they were developing Trizon, right? And over a period of time, I think they looked at Malaysia and they, through many factors, came to the conclusion that probably Malaysia as a country was mirroring what Sri Lanka would be like, 8 to 10 years later, right? So then they drew inspiration from that of saying, so if this is the way Malaysia is going, then maybe we need to design for that in Sri Lanka in 5 to 8 years. So there are different ways of sometimes hypothesis you make, right? Sometimes hard data, right? But I think we can no longer kind of yes, intuition is important and still relevant, but just going on your gut, I think is in an age, right, where you can target more specifically and get better results of that targeting. It would be a shame to just have a blanket approach and say, I want to do this and this kind of communication and stuff like that, right? Even in digital, does an influencer campaign work for everything? What kind of testimonials really work, right? And there are a lot of analytics you can do to understand how your commercial and viewing works from those first few seconds right through that. What is an ideal size for an asset, right? Is it 10 15 seconds or is it 20 30 seconds, right? That's all available for us, right? But sometimes we allow our predispositions and our biases of saying, no, I think this is the right type of asset. Here the data is there telling you one thing, but you have your own biases and you say, no, I think we should go with this kind of. So I think we don't have any excuse on that. Data is clearly something that we have to look at. Data not only from a consumer and market lens, but even in your own portfolios, right? Do we know which SKUs or which products give you better margins, right? Sometimes you might have a big brand or a big SKU, right? That is growing faster with a much lower margin. Now, you'd much rather not grow that big brand higher than your average company growth because it will bring your margin down, right? So, understanding the nuances of how you do that really is important, right? So, from costs that go into in your supply chain, sometimes I remember when I was at Atlas, right, the cost of a pen, few cents sometimes on, let's say, ink or a plastic or something like that had a big impact. But unless you don't know that data, then you won't address it, right? So brand managers really have to be on top of all of the data right across their brands.
All right, thank you so much, Ms. Ramani. I think now it's a time to move on to our Q&A session. I would like to invite anyone who want to share your thoughts or questions. You can share them on our chat box so that we can direct them. Please feel free to share your questions to our panel. All right, then I hope everything is clear. And if you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to share with us. And now then we can end our program. So we really appreciate the engagement and thoughtful questions. And it's been wonderful to see your active participation as well. So as we have come to the end of today's session, I want to sincerely thank our respectful resource personnel, Ms. Ramani Samarasundara and Dr. Lasantha Mahindaraja, for sharing their valuable insight and expertise. So, and also a big thank you to everyone who joined with us today and contributed to these engaging conversations. We hope you leave with useful takeaways. We look forward to welcoming you again in our future similar sessions. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.